Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today we're going to be talking about the 19 absolute best movies currently included with your Prime Video subscription. So I don't know what's going on lately, but it seems as if Amazon's kind of giving up on Prime Video, at least for movies. They're really focusing on their original series. But in this list, I did find 20 really good movies, but I really had to dig. So in less time than it would normally take you to find something to watch, I'm gonna present you with 20 really great options. AG1 by Athletic Greens sponsored this video. I'll tell you more about them later in the video, but let's go ahead and start with my number 19 pick, CEDAR Rapids. Now this stars Ed Helms and John C. Reilly on a business convention in Cedar Rapids. And this is a pretty good little rated R comedy starring those guys. Now plot-wise, there's not much going on. Ed Helms is sort of new to the convention life, and he hooks up with these seasoned veterans and they start cutting loose on this business trip, and that is about it. There's also a really great supporting cast here, so even though there's not just like knee slapper situations going on in this movie, everyone involved really elevates this thing and makes it fun. It is at the back of the list, but I do strongly recommend this for anyone who's a fan of Ed Helms or John C. Reilly. The next spot on this list goes to a Colin Farrell flick, and it's one of his early sort of big blockbuster movies with The Recruit. Now, this also stars Al Pacino, and in this movie, Colin Farrell plays a CIA trainee who ends up going on a mole hunt. It's got some Mission Impossible type stuff without any of sort of the big set pieces. But what I really like about this movie is there's quite a bit going on. They packed a lot into it. The story changes, things get a lot more complicated than you would typically get with this type of movie. And obviously Colin Farrell has gone on to do some great stuff, but back at this time, he was doing some blockbuster stuff that was hit and miss. This is one that I thought was quite good and was just largely underappreciated, even back in 2003. Now, speaking of some big stars in underrated movies, one of John Travolta's most underrated movies is Blowout, which was actually directed by Brian De Palma. In fact, Blowout is so good, it's actually part of the Criterion Collection, and in this movie, John Travolta plays a sound recorder, or I guess sound engineer, and he records the sound of a car accident that he believes was actually a murder. And what's really cool about Blowout is he begins working with very, very thin evidence. I mean, there's almost nothing for him to grab onto, and then it develops into this great mystery that's really well directed by Brian De Palma, and it still looks great today because it's part of the Criterion Collection. It's been remastered really well, so the movie's sharp, it looks good, and it's a very, very good mystery movie starring John Travolta. This is a great example of just a movie I highly recommend. I don't care if you're a fan of John Travolta or not, if you care about Brian De Palma movies, this is just a good, solid movie that is sure to please a pretty broad audience. So the following statement is true. Martin Scorsese has directed twice as many remakes as he has sequels. And that's because he's only done 2 remakes and 1 sequel, the sequel being The Color of Money, which is actually a sequel to The Hustler, which is a great 1961 film starring Paul Newman and Jackie Gleason. Now, the Scorsese version stars a very old Paul Newman who's playing the same character, yet he's mentoring a new young hustler with Tom Cruise. Now, I actually really like Tom Cruise's performance in this movie. He is obviously much more known nowadays for his action roles, but he was always a fantastic actor, and it's cool to see him play this character who's a little too overconfident. He plays all of that really, really well, and this movie is an excellent follow-up to The Hustler, which is still an excellent movie that works really well today. I actually think Scorsese's sequel is not quite as good as the original. I think the original is a little more solid, and the sequel is a little bit looser, which is why it's so far back on this list. In fact, I'd probably put the original really close to the front of this list, but The Color of Money is still a really fantastic movie. Whether you care about pool or not, it's plenty entertaining from beginning to end. Okay, we're not quite done with hidden gem and lesser known movies on this list just yet. There's a few more, but we are starting to edge into the more well-known movies with Castaway. Now, obviously Castaway has held up over time. I mean, Wilson himself is a meme, and there's so many things that have endured with this movie. I feel like except for the entire movie itself. And Castaway is excellent. Now, you may remember bits and pieces of it, but it starts off great. There's this amazing plane crash sequence that was incredibly well done. And then obviously you're spending most of the time on this island with Tom Hanks, but think about that for a second. You know, he's not the only actor to do that, to be the only person on camera for most of the movie, but he did it in a way that makes Castaway work for mass audiences. This is not some little indie thing that only the art film crowd is gonna enjoy. Mass audiences really enjoyed and connected with this movie despite there being hardly any dialogue. I mean, that's quite a feat, and Castaway is a really beautiful movie. Even if you didn't really connect with the ending the first time you saw it, I will say it is an ending that will hit people differently depending on where they are in their life, yet just another reason why this is such a good movie. All right, we've got 14 movies left on this list, but it's time for me to tell you about today's sponsor, AG1 by Athletic Greens. Now, over the past couple of years, I have made dramatic changes to my lifestyle. I've become a full-time YouTuber. Obviously, there was a global pandemic, and in the mix of all of that, I have really started to prioritize my health, largely due to the pandemic. I mean, I'm exercising routinely, I feel great, and one of the things I've introduced into my routine over the past several months is AG1 by Athletic Greens. I mean, just one scoop of the AG1 powder is completely packed with vitamins, antioxidants, probiotics, I mean, everything you want from a leafy green diet packed into a really convenient 8-ounce drink. Now, taking AG1 every day in conjunction with exercise has made me feel so much better day to day. And I don't just feel great, I also feel like I'm checking something off the list. I know I'm getting a lot of the nutrients that I would be missing from a leafy green diet. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't wake up in the morning craving a big bowl of spinach, but I can knock back an 8-ounce glass of Athletic Greens and benefit from a leafy green diet throughout the day. And right now, when my viewers use the link in the video description, they're gonna get a free gift that includes a year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2, which is gonna further support your immune system. And honestly, I do not know why you wouldn't want to have the most resilient immune system possible right now. But when you order, you're gonna get all this: the big bag of Athletic Greens, the nice jar to keep it in the fridge, the scoop, the bottle to drink it out of, and you're also gonna get 5 travel packs as part of that free gift. So again, go to the link in the description. I've absolutely loved adding this to my routine. I think a lot of you will as well. But let's move on with this list because we got 14 movies left to talk about. All right, my next pick got a ton of critical acclaim back when it came out, but it was still largely unseen because it's mostly for the art crowd. But Beast of the Southern Wild is a beautiful movie. Now, this takes place in a fantasy world. As you look at some of the clips I'm showing you, it looks like it's just sort of like poverty-stricken Louisiana, and it does appear that way for most of the movie, but the way the story is told, they live in sort of a fanciful world. Now, it's up for debate as to how much of that is in this little girl's head and how much of it is actually the world of the movie, but it makes for something really stunning. I mean, this is, you don't hear me say this often, but this is the type of movie that you could refer to as poetic. That's very much the way that it's delivered. So if any of that strikes you, again, this is a beautiful movie, but if you're not used to watching artsier movies, this one may confuse you a little bit just because it does have a really bizarre tone and direction. Now, if Beasts of the Southern Wild is not really your bag, but you still want to watch a really heartwarming movie about a little girl, I have always had a soft spot for Little Miss Sunshine. Now, this movie was such a hit, there's probably not many people watching that have not seen this movie, but for a movie about a family on a cross-country trip, Little Miss Sunshine is surprisingly broadly appealing. Every single character in this movie is incredibly well carved out. You've got such a big family, and there's so many characters, yet they manage to really define them all fairly quickly, and then they're all very different. That's what makes Little Miss Sunshine really special. It also has a lot of fantastic moments in it that are just elevated by this really great cast. If it's been a while since you've seen it, not only is it well worth rewatching, but I think you'll be surprised at how rewatchable this movie actually is because of all those great moments that kind of only get better and richer and funnier with multiple viewings. But then if neither one of those is for you, District 9 is also included with Prime Video right now, which is one of my favorite movies in this genre. And no, not just the sci-fi genre, but the lower budget sci-fi. Now this was filmed for about $30 million, which sounds like an extraordinary amount of money, but for a movie like this with this many visual effects packed in, it is not much money at all, which actually squeaks this into an indie category. In fact, District 9 is one of my most anticipated, or I guess I should say craved, sequels that we've never got. Neil Blomkamp went on to do some other movies that were hit and miss. I think they missed more than they hit, and for some reason, they just did not make a District 9 2, but still the original. Not only does it have this amazing look, but it goes in this dark, twisted body horror sci-fi thing. It's got some amazing, amazing visuals and some wild action sequences as you get closer and closer to the climax. Just a solid movie from beginning to end. If it's been a while since you've watched it, it is easily one of the best things on Prime Video right now, along with the remaining movies on this list. Now, I am a big Wes Anderson fan. In fact, I find some of his most recent work to be among his best. Yet with that statement, I'll also say one of his first movies I think is still one of his best. I absolutely love everything about Rushmore.
I like your nurse's uniform, guy.
These are OR scrubs.
Oh, are they?
Bill Murray is featured in a lot of Wes Anderson movies, and while I like his character in most of them, I think this might be his best Wes Anderson role. You also get this really early role from Jason Schwartzman, who went on to do some amazing things, but this is kind of the crown jewel of his movie career. He was really young, and he carried this entire Wes Anderson feature that stars Bill Murray. I mean, it works so incredibly well. It's got such a subtle sense of humor that is pretty consistent all the way through, and this is just a great movie that makes me chuckle and is still a good movie from beginning to end too. It's not just a silly Bill Murray movie. There's some solid stuff going on here, and I absolutely love it. If you've never seen it, it is a classic movie for a reason. They do have quite a few M. Night Shyamalan movies included with Prime Video, including The Sixth Sense and Signs, and while I like those movies, I find The Sixth Sense, even though it's kind of his most famous movie, I find it to not be that rewatchable. Most of the value in that movie is in the twist and Haley Joel Osment's performance. Not as much with the story in the movie, but Unbreakable, I think, is one of his, if not his best movie. There are quite a few movies that take a different approach to the superhero genre, but none of them quite do it the way Unbreakable does, and I feel like it's very sophisticated. Now, it's pretty easy to understand, it's not overly complex or anything like that, but there's some subtlety to it, yet it still goes in this comic book direction, but it never quite gets silly. It lives in this really interesting limbo space, and as weird as that is, Unbreakable works. Like, it feels like it could actually take place in our world. And for that reason, all the little subtle things that he did with the writing and the directing on Unbreakable, I think is what makes it his best film. Now, there are some that you may say are more entertaining or more fun to watch, and even though I liked Splinter, I don't think he really followed up Unbreakable very well with Glass. It didn't quite work, but Unbreakable is highly rewatchable. It's an amazing story, and it's incredibly well told. All right, let's dial the clock all the way back to 1974 with Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein. Now, it's hard to say what is Mel Brooks's best movie because he made so many bangers, but Young Frankenstein is definitely up there. And what's amazing about it is that even when it came out in 1974, it was done in this style to feel very much like an old movie. And it's not just black and white. I mean, just the way it was shot and everything looks like it's from another era. Yet it still works surprisingly well today. The humor still lands. Gene Wilder is an absolute genius. I mean, I know he does get a lot of credit, but I still think Gene Wilder is one of the most underappreciated performers of the 20th century. This movie's almost 50 years old, almost half a century, yet all the humor still works really well because it's all based in silliness for the most part, and it's not topical or of a particular era, which is why this thing still holds up so well. All right, now we'll change things up with what is largely considered one of the best movies depicting war, particularly the Vietnam War, with Platoon. Now, personally, as a movie buff, I think Apocalypse Now is the grander project in this category, yet Platoon is still an amazing movie. You know, Charlie Sheen is the lead. This is certainly one of his best movies and best roles, but there's such an amazing supporting cast in this movie. I mean, for a veteran like Willem Dafoe that has done tons, countless good movies, Platoon is still one of his best. You've also got Tom Berenger, Keith David, Forrest Whitaker, and even one of Johnny Depp's earliest appearances. Now, this was directed by Oliver Stone, and I do consider it to be one of his best, but it's also his most sort of straightforward movie. He gets a little crazy with the direction and the editing and things in his movies, which I love, but he didn't do that here. He really respected, I think, the veterans here and tried to tell a story that was different from some of the other stories being told at the time. That's how good this movie is, and it's not even close to the top spot. That's how strong the rest of this list is. Now, on this list, I've already mentioned some of my favorite directors, and the Coen brothers certainly fit into that category, so much so that what little we have left on this list actually features two Coen brothers movies. The next one is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Another one with timeless humor, still incredibly funny today. And if you didn't know, this is actually based on the Odyssey. The Coen brothers have not adapted things in their work much, and they took the Odyssey and turned it into this Southern epic. Not only that, this was one of the first movies to use a new kind of technology that allowed them to change the color palette of the movie digitally, even though this was shot on film. I know that's confusing, but this beautiful color, these gold and amber colors that everything have in this movie, was to represent the Dust Bowl age and things, but where they filmed, everything was luscious and green, so it looked nothing like it does on camera, and it just adds this amazing style to the movie, which it didn't really need because the characters are so amazing. There's so many not just great performances, but great character actors doing really strong character work in this movie. There's some amazing cinematography and obviously a great story. I mean, it's based on the Odyssey, so there's so much going for this movie, and on top of all that, it's one of the funniest movies the Coen brothers have ever made. I don't know that I would say it's as funny as The Big Lebowski, but it is close in terms of laughs per minute. So if it's been a while since you've seen it, trust me, put it on. You're gonna laugh at this more than you will almost anything else included with Prime Video or Netflix right now for that matter. All right, my last hidden gem movie on this list, and then the final five are really well-known movies, but I can't wait to talk about them. My next pick, though, is 13 Assassins. Now, this is actually from director Takashi Miike, who has directed, I think, over 100 movies as of right now, and will probably film a couple more before I finish editing this video. But he's responsible for gems like Ichi the Killer and Audition, two really grim movies. And while 13 Assassins isn't a complete horror show, it does have dark moments, and it culminates in this epic battle that is unlike anything that you've seen. But this is an amazing samurai movie from 2010. You will have to read subtitles for this movie. It is worth it. There's an amazing villain. There's great heroes. This has a lot in common with the classic Seven Samurai. It's a very, very similar plot, so it is familiar. It's something you've seen remade in American Westerns, but 13 Assassins is one of the best in this category because Takashi Miike did such a good job directing it, and it goes to such an epic place by the end. It's just edges into over-the-top territory, and I love it for that. If you've never seen it and you typically like my recommendations, 13 Assassins is a top-tier Darren Van Dam pick. Now, whereas 13 Assassins ends with this big, epic, bloody battle, my next pick begins with one of the biggest, most epic bloody battles, not just in movie history, but in actual history, with Saving Private Ryan. This movie still holds up today in a variety of ways. One of them is just all of the special effects and visual effects. I mean, this is from 1998, and most movies created that year have visual effects that are completely outdated today. They aged over the last 20 plus years, but Saving Private Ryan and honestly most of Steven Spielberg's movies have not for some reason. He knows how to film for effects in a way that makes them really enduring over time, and you can see that stand out more with movies like Jurassic Park and E.T., but Saving Private Ryan feels so real and visceral, you're not even aware of the amount of effects that you're seeing on screen because the movie puts you in this place in a way that no other movie has been able to do. There are some amazing movies about World War II. Nothing puts you on the beach in Normandy the way that Saving Private Ryan does. The first 30 minutes of this movie is really its own short movie. It's got its own narratives and things that conclude by the end of that first 30 minutes. And then you get sent off on this really epic journey that has a ton of great moments in it throughout that almost get overshadowed by that incredible opening sequence. But don't forget, Saving Private Ryan also has a really incredible end sequence. Even if it doesn't quite work as a historical reference or anything, it does work as a movie. This movie looks amazing today. It's got, again, amazing moments in it. Makes for a great watch, especially with Memorial Day around the corner. This could make a really fantastic watch. Then just don't forget, this movie's almost 3 hours, so make sure you got the time for it. And then in classic Darren Van Dam style, I'm going with a classic action movie above Saving Private Ryan on the list with Die Hard. Now, I've probably only talked about Die Hard a handful of times here on the channel because what's the point of mentioning it? However, with Prime Video having such slim pickings, it's a perfect opportunity to talk about some of my favorite movies, Die Hard being one of them. This is from director John McTiernan, who not only did this movie, he also directed Predator and The Last Action Hero and Die Hard with a Vengeance, some of the best action movies ever made, and they all had this amazing look. I mean, he was doing lens flares way before J.J. Abrams was on the scene, and they look amazing. Die Hard still looks incredible today, and for one of the same reasons Saving Private Ryan works so well today, Die Hard has a lot of really great moments in it. There's a lot of funny moments, a lot of moments that are just really fun to rewatch over and over again, which is what makes Die Hard so enduring. But this movie was expected to be a failure. Fox did not put a ton of money into it. In fact, they actually filmed it in a building that Fox owned that was under construction, and they were kind of concerned that Bruce Willis might not actually make a great action hero. He was kind of this funny guy on The Honeymooners, and I don't know, they didn't think it was going to work. He's running around barefoot most of the movie, and it was not in line with some of the action heroes that were popular at the time. But Fox executives are actually really famous for being wrong a lot. And the fact that Die Hard handled the action hero in a different way is largely what made it so successful. He's barefoot, he's bleeding, he's kind of a regular guy. He's got a little bit more of an edge to him than your average cop, but not by much, and that's what made it so interesting and what allowed the audience to connect with it. And you would see the same thing done over and over again. Now, obviously, by the end of the series, they turned him into a superhero, and the movies suffered as a result, which just goes to show you, it's a lot of times these executives, they don't even know what really makes these movies work as much as you and I do. But Die Hard is still one of those movies you can put it on in the middle of the movie and still enjoy it all the way through. It almost doesn't matter what part you're watching. It's guaranteed to be more entertaining than a lot of the other stuff that's going to be available to you on Prime Video right now. All right, we're only at number 3 on this list, and my number 3 pick is one of, if not the greatest Western of all time, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Now, this is from director Sergio Leone, and it is the 3rd installment in the unofficial Dollars or Man with No Name trilogy. Clint Eastwood stars in all of them, but he's vaguely the same character. There are some actors that appear in each movie that are playing different characters, and essentially what I've always thought about this trilogy is you get a great director, a brilliant, forward-thinking, inventive director like Sergio Leone, essentially taking 3 cracks at the same movie. Each one in that series gets a little bit better, and then you end up with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is the richest, has the best characters, it's the longest, and really the most refined and the one that will endure possibly for centuries. Literally, this may be one of those Western movies that survives nuclear war somehow, that people are watching out in space hundreds of years from now. It's that good of a movie. I mean, it is spoofed more than almost any movie ever made. The score is one of the most famous ones in movie history, one of the most famous. It's got some of the most famous moments in it, and is one of the best, if not the best, Westerns of all time for those reasons. All right, now I've already mentioned Martin Scorsese once on this list, but my number 2 pick goes to him again with Raging Bull. Now this one has so many amazing moments in it that stand separate from the story itself. Case in point, there's an opening sequence where Robert De Niro is arguing with his wife about a steak. His brother comes in, they have some banter. There's some story elements and some plot development, even though there's not much of a plot in this movie. There's some story developments that occur in that scene, but for the most part, it is this slice of life in New York City during this era. It's people yelling out the windows at each other, and it's funny and serious at the same time. Martin Scorsese would like further refine this comedic style where you get a few more laughs in a movie like Goodfellas, and then you get all the way up to something like The Wolf of Wall Street that has this really funny electric banter. You get early whiffs of that in Raging Bull, in addition to it being this really amazing movie. The movie gets a lot of credit for Robert De Niro having gained weight for it. And while that does work, like it looks good on camera and it is kind of an amazing feat, that's done so often nowadays, it's not nearly as impressive. What's more impressive is how well this movie was shot. It's packed with amazing little movie-making things that are largely invisible on the first viewing, yet it's still a really entertaining movie and I highly recommend it. Yet when you go back and dig in further, they did brilliant things, like when Jake LaMotta's losing a boxing match, they actually built a smaller ring so it felt claustrophobic and tight, yet when he's winning a fight, they built much larger rings, so it's this big sweeping and he's knocking guys across the ring, and there's tons of that type of stuff in this movie, and it is just amazing because of it. If you've never seen it, you consider yourself a movie buff, I promise you Raging Bull is required viewing. And then I told you I had another Coen Brothers movie on this list, and while it might not be my favorite of theirs, it's damn close, and it deserves a number 1 spot on this list, and that is Fargo. Now obviously this is a really well-known movie, and you don't need me to go on too long about it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Because not only does this have a great story and some great performances and some funny moments alongside some dark moments, the cinematography in this movie is incredible, even though it's very, very minimalistic. All the shots are really well planned out. It's got a look to it that's incredibly consistent. There's moments of tension that are incredibly well directed, and then just funny, quirky moments that seem like they shouldn't belong in the same movie, yet this movie feels incredibly cohesive. This is one that has only gotten richer over time. If it's been a while since you've seen it, I guarantee you it's better than you remember it being, and it's well worth watching, especially if you're having any trouble finding something good to watch. Fargo is way better than most anything else you're gonna catch on streaming right now. But that is the list. If you've seen anything else lately worth watching, be sure to let us know in the comments below. I do read them, and who knows, one of your recommendations might make it onto a future video. If you need more recommendations, try watching one of my most recent uploads, or go to DarrenVanDam.com where I've got some movie recommendations right there on the homepage. You can even sign up for my newsletter and get recommendations straight to your inbox. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special Prime Video episode, and you will see me on the next one.